Those eyes. My God, those are my eyes. Jonathan Arden's voice cracked like shattered glass, the room falling silent. Guests froze with champagne flutes mid-air. 100 eyes turned toward him, their polished smiles dimming as his trembling hand pointed, not at Naomi, but at the small boy clinging to her dress. Naomi's shoulders straightened. Her hand gently rested on Micah's curly head, as though shielding him from the daggers of attention. She did not flinch, not even as Jonathan staggered forward, his face pale, his lips trembling. The chandelier's light poured across the ballroom, exposing every crack in his composure. Jonathan Arden, the man who ruled boardrooms with a flick of his pen, looked undone. Naomi's voice cut through the hush, low, steady, unshakable. You denied him. You denied me. But the truth has a way of finding you. Gasps rippled like waves across the glittering crowd. And just like that, the memory pulled her backward, years earlier, to the marble halls of Arden Estate. The estate had a way of swallowing sound. Naomi Ellis learned quickly that even footsteps were unwelcome if they echoed too loudly. She moved with care, carrying a silver tray of glasses through the vast corridor, her shoes whispering across the polished floor. It was her second month on the job, long enough to know which doors stayed locked, which portraits hid stories of scandal, and which temper she dared not cross. Jonathan Arden's. Naomi was sweeping the library when she first noticed him watching her. He stood by the fireplace, a glass of bourbon in hand, eyes sharp as a hawk's. His suit jacket hung lazily over one shoulder. For a man born into fortune, Jonathan seemed restless, as if every luxury bored him. You move too quietly, he said. His voice was smooth but carried an edge that made her glance up. Naomi set her broom aside carefully. I didn't mean to disturb. You, sir. Jonathan's lips quirked. Disturb? No. You intrigue. Her chest tightened. She'd been warned about his flirtations. The whispers among the maids about fleeting glances and broken promises. Naomi had dismissed them. Men like Jonathan Arden did not linger on women like her. But that night, when she returned to her small quarters in the servants' wing, she couldn't shake the way his gaze lingered. Over the weeks, the tension grew. Jonathan found reasons to call her, a glass of water, a forgotten file, a trivial task that could have been given to anyone. Each time, his eyes followed her. Each time, she felt a pull she hated herself for feeling. One evening, after the estate's gala dinner, Naomi was wiping down the long oak table. The smell of wine and roses clung to the air. Jonathan entered quietly, loosening his tie, his cheeks flushed from drink. You work too hard, he murmured, stepping closer. Naomi's hand froze on the cloth. It's my job. No, he said, leaning nearer. Your job is survival. But your eyes... He paused, his hand brushing hers on the table. They hold fire. Naomi's breath caught. She wanted to step back. She wanted to remind him of the boundaries. But his nearness felt intoxicating, dangerous, like standing too close to the edge of a cliff. Her silence was his permission. And that night, the line between master and maid blurred forever. But desire, she would learn, was never protection. Naomi sat alone in her small room weeks later, staring at the pregnancy test trembling in her hands. Positive. A storm of fear and disbelief surged through her chest. When she told Jonathan, his face hardened instantly. His charm vanished like smoke. You think you'll trap me? He snapped, pacing the room. His hands clawed at his hair. You'll say anything to climb out of that uniform, won't you? Naomi's heart splintered. Jonathan, this is... your child. You know it's true. He turned, his blue eyes like ice. I owe you nothing. And if you breathe a word of this, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. His words struck harder than any slap. She realized then, he wasn't a man cornered by fate. He was a man protecting his empire. Naomi pressed her trembling hands to her stomach. She knew she couldn't fight him. Not yet. But she also knew this. She would have her child. And she would raise him with the love his father had denied. Back in the glittering ballroom, years later, Naomi met Jonathan's broken gaze with calm fire. You see the truth now, she said softly, but you'll never undo the nights I cried alone, or the strength it took to raise him without you. Micah's small fingers curled tighter around her hand. The boy's blue eyes, Jonathan's eyes, glimmered beneath the chandelier. Jonathan dropped to his knees before them, his voice shattering. "Naomi, forgive me." The crowd gasped again, but Naomi only held her son closer. Her silence was louder than any curse. The storm broke the next morning. Inside the Arden estate, the whispers traveled faster than the rain on the windows. Naomi, carrying a basket of linens, felt eyes on her. Maids pausing mid-task, footmen lowering their voices when she passed. The house had a pulse, and it was beating with scandal. At breakfast, Jonathan sat at the long marble table, his spoon stirring coffee he never drank. He looked immaculate as always, pressed white shirt, silver cufflinks, but his jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. Mrs. Doreen Calloway, the head housekeeper, stood stiffly by the doorway, her lips a thin line. Naomi placed the folded napkins at Jonathan's elbow, her hands steady though her stomach knotted. Jonathan's voice sliced the silence. "Ellis." Naomi froze. "Yes, sir?" His gaze flicked over her, cold and cutting. "I hear you've been spreading lies." The room stilled. Doreen's brow furrowed, but she said nothing. Naomi swallowed hard. "I've said nothing, sir." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Right." "Ely, then explain why the staff looks at me as though I've been caught in some indiscretion." Naomi's chest tightened. She glanced at Doreen, who gave the faintest shake of her head, warning her not to speak. Jonathan's voice grew sharper. "If you think you can use rumors to leverage yourself into comfort, think again. I don't entertain blackmail." The words stung, loud enough for the servants nearby to hear. Naomi's throat burned, but she bit down on her pride. She lowered her eyes. "Understood, sir." Jonathan's smirk widened as if her submission proved him right. He picked up his spoon again, dismissing her like an insect. But inside Naomi, something shifted. Humiliation seared hotter than fear. She had once looked at Jonathan and seen a man beneath the suit, a lonely soul, capable of tenderness. Now she saw only a predator, protecting his throne. Later that afternoon, Naomi sat in her quarters, knees drawn to her chest. The rain pattered against the small window. The pregnancy test sat hidden in the bottom of her drawer, but its truth echoed louder than thunder. Her hand rested over her stomach. She whispered, "You are mine. They won't erase you." A knock rattled the door. Naomi quickly wiped her eyes and opened it to find Mrs. Calloway, arms crossed, expression hard. "You poor child," Doreen murmured, stepping inside. "You think he'll protect you? He won't. He's his father's son, ruthless to the bone." Naomi's voice cracked. "What am I supposed to do? If I tell the truth—" Doreen cut her off, gripping her shoulders firmly. "If you tell the truth, he'll bury you. The Arden men always win, Naomi. Always." Naomi's heart pounded. "Then I'll leave." Doreen's eyes softened briefly, then hardened again. "Leave with what? You've no savings, no family here? Where will you go?" Naomi clenched her fists. "Anywhere, as long as my child isn't born in this house." "Full of lies." Doreen stared at her, then sighed deeply. "If that's your choice, don't wait too long. Once Jonathan tires of toying with you, he'll see to it you're gone anyway." That evening, Jonathan hosted a dinner party for business associates. Naomi was ordered to serve wine. Her movements were mechanical, her face a mask. As she bent to refill a guest's glass, one of the men, a graying executive with greedy eyes, leaned close and whispered, "Pretty little thing, isn't she, Jonathan?" Jonathan chuckled, not even glancing at her. "They're all replaceable." The words hit Naomi like a blade. Replaceable. She clenched the bottle tighter, her knuckles white. When she glanced at Jonathan, he was already toasting, laughing with his guests as though she were invisible. Invisible, yet carrying the proof of his cruelty within her. Hours later, after the party dispersed, Naomi was gathering glasses in the dining hall. Jonathan appeared in the doorway, jacket off, tie loose, eyes glinting with bourbon and arrogance. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said casually. Naomi kept her back to him, stacking plates. "You embarrassed me in front of the others this morning." Jonathan smirked. "A little humiliation keeps people in their place." She turned, her voice trembling but fierce. "And what place is that? Beneath you? At your mercy?" Jonathan stepped closer, his voice low. "You knew what this was, Naomi. Don't dress it up with feelings." Her chest ached. "It was never about feelings. It was about truth. And the truth is, I'm carrying your child." Jonathan's face hardened instantly. "Stop this nonsense." Naomi's tears brimmed, but she held his gaze. "Look me in the eye and tell me you don't know it's true." His jaw tightened. For a flicker of a second, doubt crossed his face. Then he snarled, "You will not use me, Naomi. You will not ruin my name." He stormed out, the slam of the door rattling the chandeliers. Naomi stood alone, trembling, her hand over her stomach. Her humiliation had been public, her truth had been denied. But somewhere, beneath the ache, resolve began to grow. If Jonathan Arden wanted to erase her, he would learn, some truths cannot be buried. The nights stretched longer after that. Naomi lay awake in her narrow bed, one hand over her stomach, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old estate. She had begun to show. Just faintly, her waist no longer disappeared under the maid's uniform. She moved slower, carried the weight of exhaustion in her bones. And still, Jonathan pretended she was nothing. Worse, he made a spectacle of it. One morning, Naomi entered the grand dining hall with a tray of tea. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, flanked by Ethan Clark, his lawyer and childhood friend. The men spoke of contracts and numbers until Jonathan's eyes flicked to Naomi. "Careful, Ellis," Jonathan said loudly. "Don't spill. I hear you're clumsier than usual these days." Ethan's brows furrowed, glancing between them. Naomi's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes down. Jonathan wasn't finished. He smirked, voice dropping with mockery. "Perhaps you've grown heavier, eating too much off the silver trays, The laughter that followed was hollow, but it was laughter nonetheless. Naomi set the tea down, her hands steady though her throat tightened. She turned to leave. "Wait," Jonathan called. She paused. "Look at me." Slowly Naomi lifted her gaze. His ocean blue eyes glittered like shards of ice. "You work in my house because I allow it," Jonathan said smoothly. "Remember that. Without me, you are nothing here. Do you understand?" Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to answer. "Yes, sir." "Good girl," he muttered, turning back to Ethan. Naomi left the room, her spine stiff, her face wet with silent tears the moment she stepped into the hall. Later that day, Ethan found her polishing silver in the kitchen. He lingered in the doorway, troubled. "You shouldn't let him speak to you like that," Ethan said softly. Naomi's rag slowed against the plate. "What choice do I have?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. That evening, Jonathan hosted a dinner party for business associates. Naomi was ordered to serve wine. Her movements were mechanical, her face a mask. As she bent to refill a guest's glass, one of the men, a graying executive with greedy eyes, leaned close and whispered, "Pretty little thing, isn't she, Jonathan?" Jonathan chuckled, not even glancing at her. "They're all replaceable." The words hit Naomi like a blade. Replaceable. She clenched the bottle tighter, her knuckles white. When she glanced at Jonathan, he was already toasting, laughing with his guests as though she were invisible. Invisible, yet carrying the proof of his cruelty within her. Hours later, after the party dispersed, Naomi was gathering glasses in the dining hall. Jonathan appeared in the doorway, jacket off, tie loose, eyes glinting with bourbon and arrogance. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said casually. Naomi kept her back to him, stacking plates. "You embarrassed me in front of the others this morning." Jonathan smirked. "A little humiliation keeps people in their place." She turned, her voice trembling but fierce. "And what place is that? Beneath you? At your mercy?" Jonathan stepped closer, his voice low. "You knew what this was, Naomi. Don't dress it up with feelings." Her chest ached. "It was never about feelings. It was about truth. And the truth is, I'm carrying your child." Jonathan's face hardened instantly. "Stop this nonsense." Naomi's tears brimmed, but she held his gaze. "Look me in the eye and tell me you don't know it's true." His jaw tightened. For a flicker of a second, doubt crossed his face. Then he snarled, "You will not use me, Naomi. You will not ruin my name." He stormed out, the slam of the door rattling the chandeliers. Naomi stood alone, trembling, her hand over her stomach. Her humiliation had been public, her truth had been denied. But somewhere, beneath the ache, resolve began to grow. If Jonathan Arden wanted to erase her, he would learn, some truths cannot be buried. The nights stretched longer after that. Naomi lay awake in her narrow bed, one hand over her stomach, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old estate. She had begun to show. Just faintly, her waist no longer disappeared under the maid's uniform. She moved slower, carried the weight of exhaustion in her bones. And still, Jonathan pretended she was nothing. Worse, he made a spectacle of it. One morning, Naomi entered the grand dining hall with a tray of tea. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, flanked by Ethan Clark, his lawyer and childhood friend. The men spoke of contracts and numbers until Jonathan's eyes flicked to Naomi. "Careful, Ellis," Jonathan said loudly. "Don't spill. I hear you're clumsier than usual these days." Ethan's brows furrowed, glancing between them. Naomi's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes down. Jonathan wasn't finished. He smirked, voice dropping with mockery. "Perhaps you've grown heavier, eating too much off the silver trays, The laughter that followed was hollow, but it was laughter nonetheless. Naomi set the tea down, her hands steady though her throat tightened. She turned to leave. "Wait," Jonathan called. She paused. "Look at me." Slowly Naomi lifted her gaze. His ocean blue eyes glittered like shards of ice. "You work in my house because I allow it," Jonathan said smoothly. "Remember that. Without me, you are nothing here. Do you understand?" Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to answer. "Yes, sir." "Good girl," he muttered, turning back to Ethan. Naomi left the room, her spine stiff, her face wet with silent tears the moment she stepped into the hall. Later that day, Ethan found her polishing silver in the kitchen. He lingered in the doorway, troubled. "You shouldn't let him speak to you like that," Ethan said softly. Naomi's rag slowed against the plate. "What choice do I have?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Jonathan, he's under pressure. The board, the investors, he's not himself." Naomi let out a bitter laugh. "Then who is he, Mr. Clark? Because what I see is a man who hides behind money, hurting people he thinks can't fight back." Ethan hesitated. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. He simply left her there, the clink of silver echoing like tiny chains. The cruelty spread like rot. Servants whispered when she passed, emboldened by Jonathan's scorn. "Shameful," one cook muttered. "Doesn't know her place," another said. "Trying to trap him," hissed a third. Naomi kept her chin high, but every word pierced. She felt herself shrinking inside the very walls she scrubbed clean. Mrs. Calloway, the head housekeeper, watched from afar. One evening, she pulled Naomi aside in the laundry room, her hands wrinkled from years of soap and steam. "You're strong, girl," Doreen murmured, "but strength can't fight a man who owns everything. Don't let him destroy you. Leave before it's too late." Naomi nodded, but tears slid down her cheeks. "And go where?" she whispered. "With what?" Doreen's silence was answer enough. 2 weeks later, the breaking point came. The staff had gathered in the ballroom, preparing for another of Jonathan's grand events. Naomi was arranging flowers when she felt a sharp pain ripple through her stomach. She staggered, gripping the vase. "Careful, Ellis!" Jonathan's voice rang across the hall. He stood with a cluster of businessmen smirking. "You'll end up breaking more than glass." The men chuckled, oblivious. Naomi steadied herself, breath shallow, humiliation burning hotter than the pain. She placed the flowers down and walked out without a word. Jonathan's laughter followed her like smoke. That night, Naomi packed a single bag in her room. The uniform, the apron, the shoes she had polished to perfection. She left them folded on the bed. When Mrs. Calloway entered, Naomi stood by the window, moonlight glinting on her tear-streaked face. "You're leaving," Doreen said softly. Naomi nodded. "I have to. For him." She touched her stomach gently. "He deserves more than this." Doreen's eyes filled, though she quickly blinked them away. She pressed a small envelope into Naomi's hand. "It's not much, but it'll get you a start. And I'll pray for you, child." Naomi's throat tightened. "Thank you." She slipped out before dawn, her footsteps light across the marble one last time. Behind her, the estate loomed, cold, magnificent, and merciless. Ahead of her, uncertainty stretched wide. But it was hers. And so, Naomi Ellis walked away from Jonathan Arden, her dignity in tatters, but her spirit unbroken. Neither knew then that their paths would cross again, not in shadows, but beneath the blinding lights of truth. The years passed like chapters in a book Naomi had no choice but to write. She found work in a modest diner on the edge of Charleston. The pay was meager, the hours long, but the rhythm of clattering dishes and the scent of frying onions was steady, something she could cling to. In the evenings, she returned to a one-bedroom apartment where a small crib sat by the window. Her son, Micah, became her anchor. From the moment she held him, his skin a warm brown like hers, but his eyes startlingly blue like Jonathan's, Naomi knew her sacrifices were not in vain. Neighbors whispered, of course. They speculated about the boy's father, some guessing the truth, others spinning stories, but Naomi never faltered. She told Micah bedtime tales of courage and dignity, never of betrayal. By the time Micah turned 5, he was a curious, bright child who asked endless questions. "Mama, why are my eyes blue and yours are brown?" Naomi would smile gently. "Because you were made to see the world in your own way." She shielded him from the name Arden. But fate has a way of dragging buried truths to the surface. It was a crisp autumn evening when Naomi's diner received a catering request from the Charleston Foundation, a glittering charity gala hosted in none other than Arden Hall. Naomi's chest clenched when she saw the letterhead. She considered refusing, but the diner owner insisted. The money was too good. And so, on the night of the gala, Naomi dressed in her catering uniform, her hair tied neatly back. She left Micah with a neighbor and prayed the event would pass like a shadow. But shadows have a way of finding light. The ballroom shimmered with gold that evening. Crystal chandeliers dripped like icicles, violins sang from the corner, and Charleston's elite glittered in gowns and tuxedos. Naomi moved silently between tables, pouring wine, refilling glasses. She kept her head low, her heart pounding with each familiar marble column she passed. And then she heard it. "Naomi?" The voice froze her blood. Slowly, she turned. Jonathan Arden stood a few feet away, taller, sharper, but unchanged in his icy handsomeness. His hair was shorter now, his suit darker, his jaw harder, but his eyes, those same ocean blue eyes, narrowed in disbelief as they locked on her. For a long, breathless moment, the noise of the gala faded. Jonathan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What are you doing here?" Naomi's chin lifted. "Working, like always." His gaze flickered over her uniform, then back to her eyes. Something unreadable crossed his face. Guilt, perhaps, or memory. "Naomi," he began, but she turned swiftly, carrying her tray away. She had survived too much to let him unravel her with a single look. But fate was not done. Later that night, Naomi slipped into the courtyard for air. The autumn wind curled through the hedges, cool against her flushed cheeks. She leaned against the stone balustrade, whispering to herself, "Just one more hour, then I'll be gone." A small hand tugged her skirt. Naomi gasped, heart skipping. "Micah?" Her neighbor had brought him, saying he missed his mother too much to stay behind. The boy clung to her leg, his curls tousled, his blue eyes shining. "Sorry, Mama," he mumbled, yawning. "I wanted to see you." Naomi knelt, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "You shouldn't be here, baby. But we'll go home soon." And then she heard it again. That voice. "Naomi." Jonathan stood in the courtyard doorway, frozen. His eyes fell on the boy. His breath hitched audibly. Micah blinked at the stranger curiously, tilting his head. In that instant, father and son looked into the same mirror of blue. Jonathan staggered forward, his hand gripping the balustrade for support. His voice cracked. "Those eyes, my God, those are my eyes." The gala music floated faintly from inside, but the courtyard was a world apart. Naomi rose slowly, her hand on Micah's shoulder, her own voice steady, though her heart thundered. "You denied him. You denied me. But the truth has a way of finding you." The words cut through Jonathan like a blade. For once, the master of every room stood powerless. And the world, his world, was about to witness it. The courtyard doors had not fully closed. The hum of the gala spilled into the night, and with it, curious footsteps. A pair of women in sequined gowns drifted out, followed by men with cigars and glasses of brandy. They had overheard Jonathan's trembling voice. They saw the boy, and whispers spread like fire on dry grass. Naomi stiffened. She had fought for years to keep this moment private. Now it unfolded before Charleston's elite, beneath chandeliers and gossiping eyes. Jonathan's face drained of color. He turned as if to order the onlookers away, but their stares held him in place. He was a man pinned by truth. Micah tugged on Naomi's sleeve, whispering, "Mama, who is he?" Naomi crouched, brushing a curl from his forehead. "He's just someone who should have cared for you," she murmured, loud enough for Jonathan to hear. Jonathan's throat worked. He stepped closer, his voice shaking. "Naomi, please, I didn't know." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Didn't know? You looked me in the eye and called me a liar. You said you'd bury me if I spoke. You knew, Jonathan. You just chose cruelty over truth." The words cracked through the night. The crowd behind them shifted uneasily, their jeweled masks of courtesy slipping. Ethan Clark pushed his way through, his lawyer's calm rattled by the scene. "Jonathan," he hissed, "say nothing. Not here. Not now." But Jonathan shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. "I can't. Not anymore." He dropped to his knees on the cold stone, reaching out as if the ground itself had swallowed his pride. "Naomi, forgive me." Gasps rippled through the spectators. The great Jonathan Arden kneeling before a maid he had once humiliated. Naomi's chest tightened. For years she had imagined this moment, but now that it was here, there was no triumph. Only the heavy ache of wounds that apologies could not mend. She shook her head slowly. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give. You'll have to earn it. From him." Her hand rested on Micah's shoulder. The boy looked at Jonathan with wide, uncertain eyes, sensing the weight of a history he couldn't yet understand. Jonathan's tears spilled freely, his voice breaking. "I'll do anything. Just, please, don't let him grow up thinking I didn't want him." Naomi's voice softened, but it was steady as stone. "He will grow up knowing the truth. That his father denied him. That his mother raised him. And that wealth means nothing if it costs your soul." The courtyard was silent, save for the distant strains of the violin inside. The onlookers shifted, some averting their eyes, others drinking in the downfall of a man who had seemed untouchable. Ethan touched Jonathan's shoulder, but Jonathan shrugged him off, still kneeling, his pride hattered in front of the world he had ruled. Naomi straightened, holding her son's hand. "Come, Micah, we're going home." She turned, her back to Jonathan, and walked through the parted crowd. No one stopped her, no one dared. Behind her, Jonathan's sobs echoed against the marble walls, a sound Charleston's elite would never forget. And in their whispers, Naomi's dignity began to rise like a banner above the ruin of his arrogance. The scandal spread faster than Jonathan Arden could contain it. By morning, Charleston's papers carried hushed whispers disguised as society notes. A scene at the Arden Gala leaves the city's most eligible bachelor disgraced. On social networks, blurry photographs leaked, Jonathan kneeling, his face streaked with tears, a boy with unmistakable blue eyes clinging to Naomi's hand. Within 48 hours, board members were calling emergency meetings. Investors pulled back. The Arden name, once synonymous with unshakable power, now hung under a shadow. Jonathan sat in his study, head in his hands, bourbon untouched on the desk. His empire felt like sand slipping through his fingers. The memory of Naomi's words replayed in his head. Wealth means nothing if it costs your soul. Ethan Clark stood by the fireplace, tension etched in his jaw. "Jonathan, we can spin this. Deny the rumors, settle quietly. But if you continue like last night, begging in front of a crowd, you'll be ruined." Jonathan lifted his eyes, raw and bloodshot. "I am ruined, Ethan. She was right. And the boy? He's mine." Ethan stared, stunned. "So, it's true?" Jonathan swallowed hard. "It was always true." Ethan let out a sharp breath. "Then you'd better stop thinking like an Arden and start acting like a man." Across town, Naomi sat in her modest apartment, rocking Micah as he napped. She hummed softly, but her mind churned. Neighbors had begun knocking on her door. Some came with pity, others with thinly veiled curiosity. Is it true? Was that really him? Naomi answered none. She guarded her son fiercely, refusing to let the world's hunger for scandal consume him. Samuel, her younger brother, burst through the door one evening, his eyes blazing. "Naomi, they're talking about you at the university. Some say you trapped him. Others, they call you brave." Naomi sighed. "Let them talk. I don't care what they think." Samuel clenched his fists. "You should. This is bigger than gossip. He denied you, humiliated you. Now the world finally sees him for what he is. Don't hide, Naomi. Stand tall. Make him answer for what he did." Naomi looked down at Micah, sleeping peacefully, curls fanned across the pillow. "I don't want a war. I just want him safe." Samuel's voice softened. "Safe doesn't mean silent." 2 weeks later, the confrontation came. Jonathan arrived at the diner where Naomi worked, his black car too sleek for the cracked asphalt lot. The bell above the door jingled and every head turned. He wore no suit this time, just a plain shirt, sleeves rolled, his face drawn and weary. He approached the counter slowly, eyes fixed on Naomi as though she were the only person in the room. "Naomi," he said quietly, "please, we need to talk." The diner fell into hushed silence, customers pretending not to watch. Naomi set down the tray she carried, her voice steady but sharp. "There's nothing left to say." Jonathan's throat bobbed. "There is. I was cruel. I was blind. I denied you and our son, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not when the world already knows." Naomi's heart twisted, but she kept her posture firm. "You don't get to come here and demand forgiveness. You don't get to rewrite the past because it suits you now." Jonathan's voice cracked. "Then let me try to write a different future." The room seemed to hold its breath. Naomi's co-workers exchanged wide-eyed glances, the customers leaned in closer. Naomi shook her head, tears brimming. "You want redemption, Jonathan? Earn it. Not with me, with him. Be a father if you dare. But don't think for a second that your money or your name will erase what you did." Her words landed like stones, heavy and unyielding. Jonathan bowed his head. For the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He simply whispered, "Tell me where to start." Naomi turned away, her chest heaving. For now, she had no answer. But the world did. Because by then, the story wasn't just Naomi's, it belonged to Charleston itself. The maid who had once been silenced now stood unshaken in the face of power. And Jonathan Arden's empire of arrogance was crumbling. The courthouse steps were crowded that morning, a sea of reporters, flashing cameras, and murmurs that rippled like wind through tall grass. The air was heavy with anticipation, Charleston's wealthy elite mixed with everyday workers, all drawn to witness the reckoning of Jonathan Arden. He arrived without his usual entourage, no limousine escort, no designer suit, just a man in a dark blazer, carrying the weight of his own mistakes. His eyes searched the crowd until they found Naomi, standing tall with Micah in her arms and Samuel at her side. The hush fell deeper. Naomi's posture was unyielding. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pinned back, her gaze calm but fierce. She hadn't asked for this spectacle, but the world had forced it upon her. Jonathan approached slowly, each step echoing against stone. When he finally reached her, he didn't speak to the cameras or the crowd. He looked only at her and the boy. His knees bent. He sank down on the courthouse steps, the city watching in stunned silence, and bowed his head. "Naomi," his voice trembled, "I denied you when you needed me most. I denied him, my own flesh and blood. I cannot undo the nights you cried alone, or the shame you carried because of me, but I can tell the truth now, and I will, to anyone who asks." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Camera shutters clicked like thunder. Naomi's throat tightened, her grip on Micah firm. She had imagined this moment countless times. The arrogant man brought low, begging in public. Yet now, with the sight of him broken before her, she felt no triumph, only the weight of justice long overdue. Jonathan lifted his head, tears streaking his face. He looked at Micah, who gazed back curiously with those striking blue eyes. Jonathan's breath hitched. "Son, I will spend the rest of my life proving I deserve to be called your father." Micah, too young to grasp the storm around him, reached out a tiny hand. Jonathan froze, then let the child's fingers curl around his own. A simple touch, but it shattered what remained of his pride. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others wept, and a few sneered. But no one could deny the spectacle. A billionaire undone by the innocence of a child. Naomi steadied herself. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying over the murmurs. "Jonathan Arden, I don't forgive you. Not yet. Forgiveness isn't owed. It's earned. If you truly want to be a father, then show it every single day. Not here for the cameras, not for your reputation. For him." Jonathan nodded, his voice hoarse. "I will. Even if it takes a lifetime." The judge called them inside, the legal battle ahead still daunting. Custody arrangements, financial responsibilities, public scrutiny. It would not be simple. But as they climbed the courthouse steps together, a strange calm settled over Naomi. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying the burden alone. The truth was out. Her son would never again be invisible. Months passed. The scandal that had threatened to destroy Jonathan Arden became the catalyst for his transformation. He withdrew from the ruthless games of high finance, redirecting his wealth into community projects, schools, clinics, scholarships for single mothers. Some dismissed it as damage control, but those who saw him quietly stacking bricks at a new youth center knew otherwise. Naomi remained cautious. She didn't let him into her home, didn't let sweet words sway her, but she watched. And slowly, she saw a man learning humility, stumbling, failing, but trying. Micah too saw it. He giggled when Jonathan lifted him onto his shoulders at the park, pointed excitedly at airplanes as they flew overhead. He knew nothing of betrayal or scandal. He only knew his father was there now. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast gold across the horizon, Naomi sat on her porch, Micah asleep in her arms. Jonathan approached quietly, hands in his pockets. "Naomi," he said gently, "I don't expect you to ever love me again. But I do hope one day you'll trust me enough to let me stand beside you." Naomi studied him for a long moment, then turned her gaze to her son. "Trust takes time, Jonathan. And time? We have." A soft breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. The world had tried to silence her. Power had tried to erase her. But Naomi Walker remained, steadfast, unbroken, and no longer invisible. And for Jonathan Arden, redemption had only just begun.